There we go. And it's very easy to tell that's recording.
How do I get that? Oh, I see.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we can probably begin anytime.
Buongiorno. I am Diamante da Magenta, and I am from the Shire of Appledore. I am here to instruct you a little bit on the history of coloring the food. In Italy, the Italian city-states, which now we know as Italy, we had very much beauteous food for display. Most of this food was not edible, could not eat it unless you wanted to be poisoned. And sometimes you want to make a dessert that you want to use as a poison. This is your option. I personally prefer not to poison my dinner guests. So I will begin with the colores. And I will change from Diamante to Carol Lewis, who will be much easier to understand. So yellow, the color yellow. For most historic food, the natural color was created using saffron, turmeric. Most of you will recognize that those are very strong, that color foods, and they're safe to eat. Safflower, also very safe to eat. Now, in ancient times, they also used orpiment or realgar, and this was a toxic arsenic sulfide, so very poisonous, but beautiful yellow color. So purple. To get the color purple, they squashed mollusks and took the juice, and the juice makes, and I've tried this, makes a passing fair purple. It makes everything taste like squashed mollusk. So not tasty particularly, but edible and historic. Red. To get the color red from the time of the Egyptians, they've used the crushed shells of the cochineal, which is a tiny little insect. And cochineal is still the primary substance and ingredient used in red food colorings. They also used sandalwood, which when taken in great quantities can be poisonous. They used a product called galangalli, and I have not been able to track down any real good information on that other than it was a brilliant red when mixed with linseed oil. Then there was the red from crushed rose petals. You can take red rose petals, deep red rose petals, and crush them in a mortar and pestle and blend them into what you're going to use as your sugar paste or your marchpane or your fondant. And it actually does make a very nice shade, anywhere from a soft pink all the way up to a deep, deep rose, not quite a red, but almost a red. Blue. They use blackberry pulp. One of the favorites was mulberry. Now, mulberry is fine when taken internally, but when taken in mass quantities, it can be toxic. So blue is not one of the more common colors pre-17th century. They used turnsole flowers. They also used woad, which is not particularly edible and in fact poisonous. However, you can use it and it is a very strong, beautiful blue. And they used azurite and ultramarine. Now, ultramarine was probably the most expensive mineral they used in dyeing food and in dyeing paints for artwork. It came all the way from the area we now know as Afghanistan. Green, parsley, sorrel, these will make beautiful greens. Almost any green plant will make a green or a yellow juice, which you can use to dye your food. They will add a slight flavor, an herbal type flavor to the food, And when you're dealing with fondant or marchpane or sugar paste, which is what we're basically going to talk about most here, you get very nice muted shades of greens and yellows. They also used malachite mineral and verdigris. Now, verdigris is the copper oxidization, which is created by an acetic acid being applied to the copper. And I'll get into that a little bit in more detail in a minute. For brown, they actually used finely ground breadcrumbs from the crust of the bread. And they could make deeper shades of brown by using the parts of the crust that had actually blackened a bit in the fire. They also used animal blood. Animal blood in your sugar paste will make a very acceptable brown. It's quite fat, color fast. It has a nice animalistic feature to it. So if you were doing sugar paste, animals, the adding a little bit of blood to the sugar paste when you're mixing it will give it that lovely brown. Of course, it then doesn't become a vegetarian or vegan product. Of course, cinnamon, we all know we can add cinnamon to almost anything and it turns almost everything brown. And that's a perfectly edible one. And prune juice. Prune juice makes a very soft, purpley brown, which is quite nice in your sugar paste or your marchpane or your fondant. For black, the primary ones were squid ink. That was the most commonly one used. And I'll talk about another mineral one that wasn't edible in a minute. And for gold, of course, they used real gold. They used hammered gold and gold leaf, and they liquidized the gold leaf or the flakes of gold in with alcohol and brushed that onto the food, giving it a gold luster. Deep, dark red that turns to black eventually. Now, the mineral cinnabar is what we now know is mercury sulfide. And it starts out red. It's a beautiful, rich, deep red. And then through oxidation, it eventually chemically changes and turns to black. And how we know this is from our wonderful art historians who have begun finding out what was used in periods throughout history, but especially in our SCA period applicable, 16th century, what was used to make the amazing rich reds that seemed to shade their own selves into black. And so they've discovered that that was done using the mineral cinnabar, which is toxic and poisoning. It's mercury. Please don't eat it. So there were crushed minerals, oxides, and plant extracts. And these were all mixed with hydrated clay or tannin to form an insoluble pigment for painting. They were also mixed with the same clay to add color to food, which meant that a lot of times the display food contained this hydrated clay. Not exactly poisonous, but not exactly good for your health either. But it's a period way to color food. If you're going historically accurate and you want absolute historical accuracy, you can mix any crushed mineral, any oxide, or any plant extract with the mineral clay and get the proper colors. I would then label everything saying that it is not recommended to be eaten. So these were used to paint everything from portraiture to murals. They were put on pottery, and when burned, they changed into different kinds of hues, which were not necessarily reflective of the mineral that was used. And they were used in food. Earth pigments. There are a lot of natural earth pigments, such as red ochre, yellow ochre, umber, and line white. Now, these are dug right out of the earth. Artists shape them into like sticks, like crayons with knives. And these were a ready-made painter's chalk, ready to be used as the underlayer in any painting, but also they could be ground and added to food to give color. These gave muted colors in food, but they also carried the ground earth mineral, which was not necessarily a healthful mineral to eat. A lot of the beautiful food in the 16th century and before was poisonous or just really not good for your health. So artists like Michelangelo, Rembrandt, Antoine Watteau, they used these natural earth tones, and they produced some of the most revered drawings in the art world. We know that these colors were used in food from journals of cooking masters such as Cennino or Cennino Cennini. So Cennino Cennini, Cennino Cennini, lovely Italian, wonderful cook, wrote a book called Il Libro dell'Arte. And in this book, he says, the color, and he was speaking of green earth, which was the Verona green, which is an aluminosilicate, which is poisonous. This color is good in secco, with a tempera of oak of yegg, okay, egg yolk, oak of yegg, trees and foliage, and for laying in. Laying in was the process of putting this very fine layer of green before you added the rest of the skin tones. And this gave a very natural skin tone to any painting. Because it had a very soft pale green, it makes for a very nice soft pale green in food added as well. So for the sake of the color, you have to work it very, very little with a light touch, he says. For if you grind it too much, it will become dingy and turn an ashy gray. So I was lucky enough to have been shown by a friend who makes all of his own pigments how Verona green turns gray. So you can use Verona green to make a very pale green or a gray. However, again, poisonous. Verdigris. I promised to tell you a little bit more about verdigris. Verdigris is an oxidization of copper when an acetic acid is applied to the copper. So how they used to make verdigris was they would submerge copper, pure copper, in an acetic ingredient, something like white wine vinegar, and leave it to sit until the liquid turned the color they were desirous of. Then this would be boiled down until all of the liquid was gone and all that was left were the verdigris crystals. These verdigris crystals were very easy to store and they crush up super easy. I saw my friend do it. He used hardly any effort whatsoever to crush these up into a powder. And then we mixed some powder into clay, which is basically the same process as you would use for marchpane, sugar paste, or fondant. And it was a very delightful green. But again, copper and poison. So poison or not, the dyes used for foods and cosmetics were all from natural resources and sources until 1856. So well past our period. So all of our food safe dyes to use in making food safe edible delights are not historically accurately period for our Society of Creative Anachronism time period. Sir Henry William Perkins created Movine, and he was actually trying to make an anti-malaria drug called quinine, which he eventually did make. The Movine became a very popular food coloring because it was food safe. You could ingest it with no outward indication of any illness or effect on the body. So it wasn't long then before scientists decided that artificial food safe colors might be a good idea, and they were cheaper to make. Synthetic dyes didn't affect the flavor like mollusk, making your lovely pastry taste like clam or fish. They had significantly less flavor, and if they had a flavor, it was an almost indiscernible chemical flavor, which we still can taste in some foods today. So these new colors weren't entirely non-toxic, but they were much safer than the metal and mineral-based dyes and colors used in food. Round about 1927, the USA instituted the Food and Drug Administration. They approved 7 synthetic colors as being safe. These were increased to 16 colors in the 1950s, and then more thorough investigation reduced these back down to 7. So of these 7 colors, you can create any color in the color palette that you could possibly desire. And you can buy food safe colors that are made using these particular color bases. They're considered safe. So before I begin, I would, with an actual demonstration of how I work with the fondant, I would like to show you some examples of colored pastry. So this was when it was fresh, it was a green pastry and a blue pastry. And it comes out looking very earthy and marbly. So this pastry is quite light and lovely. And this one in particular, I don't know if you can see, has been stamped with a dragon. Nope, a dragonfly. I'm trying to see if the light can show you. I'm hoping you can see that that's a dragonfly. I also have a cookie stamp that makes bees. So I did one stamped with a bee, like a honeybee. And those stamps, here's the honeybee on a regular sugar cookie. So food stamps make a beautiful food just as it is, a food stamp into your cookie. And this one here is a dragon. Oops, sorry, fingers in the way, I apologize. So the food stamp makes a raised surface on the cookie, or on, you can also use them on fondant. But on the cookie themselves, after you've stamped them, you can then add color to the plain cookie, which makes a cookie that's more diabetic safe or having less calories and less sugar. So I make my cookies with a gluten-free recipe and very low sugar. So they're a tasty treat for every day. And the color is just food coloring on top of sugar cookie. Oh no. I might lose you. I might have to switch over to my cell phone. My iPad is telling me it's low. It must be because it's cold in this room. So here's an example of a painted fondant sugar cookie, hand painted. This is the 4 seasons. So it's spring, summer, winter, and fall. This is a Ukrainian design like you would find on a paisanka egg. And this design is believed to be about 1,000 years old. It's a very basic, simple design, historically accurate. There's something else you can do with fondant. You can paint illuminations on them. This is an illuminated M. And in the handout, you'll see that I painted an illuminated book for the prince and put his entire OP on the book in lettering. It was a bit of a fun challenge. So here is the dragon cookie that was stamped. It's been laid over with fondant while still warm so that the fondant seeps down into the spaces, and then painted on top with natural food colorings. In this one, I also used coffee and tea, so you can use various food colorings that are natural. Coffee's a great one for browns. So painting. Here's a design that I have started before the class began. It's just a little swirl. And I use primarily, the paints that I use are primarily Wilton colors. However, I have also used your good old basic food coloring kits. You can see that this one's been sadly abused. And food club colors are perfectly acceptable. Any cake decorating paint you can use. Just have fun with it. So I have my a very fine, now let me find the camera, a very fine tip of only 3 or 4 hairs. This is a 5-0 paintbrush. And what it allows me to do is to make the very finest of lines. And I can write words with this very fine brush. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna have to switch over to my phone. I'm hoping I can set it up similarly. There we are. So I'm gonna exit for a minute and set up my phone, and I will be right back.
Yeah, I think everybody has the handouts. If you do not, I can repost them in the chat. Unfortunately, it doesn't do continuous, so I have to repost it whenever somebody needs one if they haven't been in there before. So.
All right. Yeah.
Let me pop your back. I'm gonna make you co-host again.
Thank you.
Pop your back over your box.
Thank you.
Fine. You'll have to say yes. Recording in progress.
Hello again.
Oh
I have to turn off the speaker. Okay. No.
Oh, it's because you got two going at the same time.
I know. I thought I
I
had
will mute the other one.
Thank you.
There we go. Now we should do it. We are.
Are we there?
How did
Nope.
it come in handy?
Yep, we're there.
So I do natural dye work, and which is all organic chemistry.
Are we there? Hello?
Yeah.
All
Yep,
right.
we're here.
Okay. Part 2 of Play with Your Food. I had an iPad issue. I had it fully charged, but it's a very old iPad and it's cold in the place where I am. I'm in the place where I work, but we close for the season. We're only a seasonal opened gallery. And so it's quite cold in the gallery here, but it's fine because it's great for working with the fondant. So that's wonderful. So this is Playing with Your Food, Known World Symposium, January the 6th, 2023. Thank you for joining me. And in the first part, I have explained a lot about colors, and there are handouts, which the moderator will make sure everyone has access to. So I was just explaining the different brushes that I use. I can use a very wide brush to get a wide line. Or a very fine brush to get a very fine line. So the fondant that I use, I have included a recipe for it in my handout. And it's a recipe that I've been using for quite some time, and it is also a historically accurate recipe. The fondant that I color with cake food coloring, the powdered cake food coloring. It makes for a much deeper, more intense color. And right now I'm just kneading a ball of fondant that has been colored with a red cake powdered food coloring. And I'm going to quickly put on the microwave oven, a very period instrument. When I apply fondant to any surface, I use as my glue honey or syrup. I have my own bees, so I prefer to use honey. So I'm working in a small space and I didn't bring a rolling pin for that reason, but you can see that a well-kneaded warmed fondant will roll out quite beautifully and flat. And then any cookie cutter will cut your fondant into beautiful shapes. And you can use the fondant on its own as a candy, or you can decorate other foods. I'm going to decorate a little sugar cookie here. So to do that, I'm going to take some honey, liquid honey, which I just heated up in the microwave oven. And I'm going to brush a layer of the liquid honey onto the cookie. And this will make the fondant adhere so that if I decided to hang this cookie on a Christmas tree, for instance, or give it as a gift, it's going to keep the fondant on the cookie and it won't slide off. Honey. Now, with natural food coloring and the type that was used in our pre-16th century SCA period, I would never be able to put my brush in my mouth without risking certain poisoning, as I explained in the first part of the video. Very simple, beautiful little iced cookie, which sell great at market, by the way. And everybody's like, oh, why are you giving away all your secrets? Why are you giving away all your secrets? Knowledge hoarded is the worst kind of greed a person can have. If you know how to do something, it's my feeling that you should teach it and share it. If you have a recipe and you want to keep it because you want be the only person who can make that, that's a sad loss to the culinary world. Whereas if you share it, other people will make it and they will say, I got this from Carol, or I got this from Mabel, or this is the recipe my great grandmother used, and I've given it out to a lot of people and they've all had success with it. So what I'm doing now is I'm rolling out some of that red fondant that I softened into a lovely little string of fondant. I wrap my fondant in parchment paper when I'm not using it. And then I wrap the parchment paper in that wonderful period product called Saran wrap. This is so that the fondant won't dry out and it will keep I've kept it for as long as a year and it's still perfectly wonderful to use. So what I'm going to show you is how to make a rope fondant edging using the colored fondant. Now the blue has also been colored using a cake powder. The colors in fondant, if you want colored fondant for any of your projects, the colors you're going to get from the cake powder are going to be more intense and more beautiful, more shocking, and actually more in resemblance to the poisonous colors they used in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. So they're going to look more period. However, they're not going to poison you, so they're not going to act period. So to make this, I'm hoping you can see what I'm doing here. Maybe I can do this because I have my phone now. Well, let's see if that works. All right. So you start in the middle and you pinch the middle and you put your finger on the middle and roll the two together. And the more gently you roll them, the tighter a twist you'll get. And why you don't start at one end and go to the other end is because the fondant won't take the strain and it will snap in the middle. So you always pinch the middle and then start in the middle. Now, when you're going to the other side, of course, you're rolling in the opposite direction. And you roll it until you have the braid you're hoping for. And you can keep rolling it, always starting from the middle and rolling out until you get the weave that you want. And this would make a nice edging on a cake, on a large cookie, or even on a small cookie. So we'll do that on the little red cookie here. All right. Now, this is why you use the honey. A little bit of honey on top here as my glue. You can use corn syrup. In a pinch, you can use water, but water is a little bit messy. So I've just done a little honey touch there. And now I take my little rope and apply it back to the cookie now that I've shown you how it needs to be glued in place. And something else you can do with your rope, you can coil it. I'm going to move this back now. Let's see what I'm doing. Here we are. And once it's coiled, you can roll it with a rolling pin. And this is what I did to get the marbled effect for the pastry. When I made a green and blue pastry, and when it was baked, it went this lovely, marbly, natural color, which makes for an interesting pie decorations. So you can roll out with a rolling pin after you've coiled your fondant. And of course, because I'm working in a very small space, I'm not at my home, and I didn't have room. I knew I wouldn't have room here for a rolling pin. So here we go. A very interesting design. And then again, you can take any cookie cutter. So this is something you can do with leftover pieces of colored fondant that you have used to decorate. You don't ever throw them away because you can knead them into a very colored marble look. And then with the honey, again, this is your glue. And you heat the honey just until it's movable, liquidy. And there you go. While your fondant is fresh and hasn't cured for at least a day, it'll be very soft. And you can press Perriel's into your fondant and they will stay. Once the fondant has cured, you can paint on it, but it really needs to cure. The fresher the fondant, the more the paint application threatens to run and streak. And also it bleeds through the fondant. But once the fondant has cured, you don't get that bleeding effect. Perriel's are misbehaving. I call them Perriel's. Other people call them silverettes. Silverettes. But you can get the gold ones, silver ones. The metallic comes in pale blue, pale pink. You can use any Perriel, like the ones that come in little heart shapes. They can be pressed into the fondant. And as I said, the fondant can be used just as a candy on its own, in which case you can embed all kinds of little edible treats. Or it can be applied to cake, cookie, or draped on a frame. So here we are with the little Perriel's. Now, I'm going to show you how the sugar cookie takes the paint. So I have several colors of paint here. And this is a bee, so we're gonna make her into a proper little honeybee. I don't dilute the paints for the majority of my decorative painting. However, you can dilute them, and then you get a very wonderful, soft wash. So you can play with a piece of fondant, lay out your piece of fondant, let it age for overnight, and then play with it. See what sorts of blends you want to use for colors. See how you enjoy making a swirl or a block of color, and practice all of your brush techniques. So I've applied some yellow striping. Now I'm applying some black striping for a classic bumblebee. Again, I use all Wilson paints, but I have used the regular food craft paints that you can buy in any grocery store, and they're perfectly fine. They do the job really well. I've used coffee and tea. I wouldn't recommend using coffee with milk or cream in it, even though that will give you a beautiful color. It will sour and possibly have a smell or a bad taste. So again, this is a stamped cookie. Sorry, I don't have enough room on my surface table here. I have a little water over there so that I can clean the brush. So here's the bee started. Now another product I use is Rainbow Dust, 100% edible metallic gold paint. I've bought this in cake decorating stores and I've found it online. It gives a beautiful metallic sheen. I have used only the gold and silver, but I have been told recently that there's also other metallic colors. So that's good to know. You can stamp cookies. You lay your stamp on the cookie and pounce through it just like you would do any stamp, and it will apply color directly to the cookie. And if you have a fondant or marchpane or sugar cane coating over the cookie, you can get this fantastic finish with a stamp. So there's our bee. There we go. There she is. Nope, wait, there. There she is. And that's on straight on the cookie. So let me quickly do the same bee on the fondant from scratch. Now, as I said, if you have soft fondant, the colors will run. They'll bleed across the fondant. And you don't want that to happen. Not when you're trying to make a work of art. Now, these cookies may seem super fiddly and a lot of work, but they're really quite well received, and people are always impressed that you've taken that much time to create something so beautiful to be eaten. In the handout, there's also a picture of a plate that I made specifically for an investiture, and it was, I made 13 of them, and they were used to serve the dessert. So you could eat the dessert and then the plate. And I did that because there was an entire feast in the Italian city-state of Verona, which had been entirely created out of sugar paste, the entire meal. So all the food was made out of sugar paste. All the all the plates and cups were made out of sugar paste. And then they were to be eaten after you'd eaten the food off of the plates, which was primarily sugar paste food. You could then eat the plates. And after you'd drunk your wine, you could then eat the cup. And I tried putting apple juice in one of my sugar paste cups. It held very well for about an hour and a half, which I was really impressed with. And then only then did the cup begin to become soft, but I was still able to finish the drink and then eat the cup, which was quite fun. Right. So we're just finishing the bee's legs here. And your designs can be as complex or as simple as you desire. You can make them actual beautiful works of art, or you can make them quick stamp art, or just plain pretty fondant. These all look very nice on a dish. We're almost done our bee. And I'm doing a little more blend work on this one because I can, and it will show up more. So you can make a bigger effort to get artsy. On the fondant than you can on the actual cookie. I'll just do some lettering here. Now this fondant has only cured for a day, and when I'm doing the lettering, you're going to be able to look at the lettering and see how it's bleeding slightly. I tend to try and cure my fondant for a couple of days when I'm going to do an artwork. And here we are. So I think that's basically all I wanted to show you. I'm going to take one more cookie and I'm going to quickly paint it in only one color. So you can see that you can just use design to create beauty. And you can see how quickly you can decorate a cookie. Because when you're making 50 of them or 200 of them, you might want to make them quickly. I love working with fondant. I find marchpane a little grainier and coarser, so it's more suited for designs that are simpler. You can get more detail and more complicated designs on a sugar paste or fondant than you can on the marchpane. So I'm hoping you will try the recipes, and I'm hoping that you will play with your food. Also, in one of the handouts, I included some natural egg dyeing, 3 recipes for natural egg dyes that you can use to dye eggs. And it shows a picture of a selection of eggs dyed using those colors and blending them. So I had started out with the 3 originals, and then I had blended each of the 3 originals half and half into different containers, getting, I think, a total of 9 colors, but I'm pretty sure in the picture I have 8 different colored eggs. And it makes a difference whether you use a white egg or a brown egg, and whether you use, I have heritage hens now, which I'm very excited about, and they produce green eggs, peach colored eggs. The protein that the hen lays down over top of the white egg on every egg except a blue egg. A blue egg is truly blue, but all the other colored eggs, if you scrub them enough, you'll get back to a white egg, because they're laying down a different protein on top of the original white calcium of the egg, and they're essentially painting their egg the color that their breed likes to create. And depending on what they're eating, they will have a different colored egg. So for instance, my copper Moran, when she's out on pasture and doing free range grazing, her eggs are dark, 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 almost a light dark chocolate. So just a beautiful, deep, rich, dark chocolate. And in the end of the laying season, which for my hens, because they're heritage, is in usually the end of October, beginning of November, they stop laying because I don't create an artificial environment for them. And so they basically stop laying. And before they do, she's off pasture, and her eggs are more of just a dark brown, just like a brown egg. Not chocolatey, not almost black. It's quite astounding. Almost done. And if I hadn't stopped painting while I was talking, I'd already be done. There we go. It's a very pretty little egg, very basic design. So what I did was I did hearts, I did diamonds. Off the diamonds, I did 3 points of just color, dots, and off the hearts, I did a little 5-pointed tree. And in the center is a 4-armed Celtic cross. And then accented with dots. Dots are an amazing accent. And if you're going to do illuminations, remember that dots are an amazing accent in any color and very powerful in white. So I think now we'll go to a Q&A, if that's possible.
Yep, we can certainly do that. Do you want to keep recording or should we stop or?
No, we can keep recording.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? I know I've got a couple, but I'll let people go first.
Yeah.
I was just curious, what is the brand of food paint you're using?
Oh, yes. The brand of the food paint, it's Wilton.
Okay, yep.
You can buy them pretty much in any cake decorating store. You can probably find Wilton paints. If you're in a big enough municipality or town, you can find them at Michael's, at many craft stores that carry cake decorating supplies will carry the Wilton brand because it's a very reliable brand of paint. I find that the only one that has any flavor to it, that adds its own flavor to what I'm decorating, is the black. But of course, the black is also going to completely coat the inside of your mouth with black when you eat the confection that's been painted with it. So I use Wilton. I also use Food Club, which you can find at any grocery store in the cake decorating and baking supplies aisle. Those aren't as intense, so you won't get as intense a shade. I should actually show you how I mean by that, because that's kind of important. Because they're a liquid food coloring that don't want to come out of their container. There we go. All right, because they're a liquid food coloring, they have the watered down color. So just let me rinse this. So now I'll just paint 1/2. Now, as you can see, it beads up on the fondant. So you have to push it around a little bit until you've worked it into the fondant. And what it does is it will give a fairly nice glaze. So that's with the Food Club, ordinary from the grocery store.
Is the Wilton liquid or is it like a gel? Because the Wiltons I've found, at least in Canada, or where I am in Canada, that I usually find the gel ones. So I have to use like water or vodka because it doesn't go after the sugar paste as much. So are they already liquid that you're using?
They're a gel and they do
Oh.
bead up a little bit, but once you work them into the fondant, they get the most beautiful intense colors. So just let me double check and see if I'm pretty sure they are. It's color right.
Mine looks almost like Jello.
Yes, they do. Well, they're not quite as thick as Jello, but they
Okay, yeah.
are more yes, they have more body to them because they
Okay.
don't have the liquid in them. But yeah, you can use, as I said, if you add water to them or water them down a little bit, you'll get a much lighter color. But here's the difference between the red on the right is the Wilton, and on the left is the Food Club. And that's the same amount of liquidy paint that I applied. So you can see the colors quite intense and beautiful with the Wilton. Now, if I water down the Wilton, oh, I don't have any clean water. Excuse me, I will get some clean water and show you when I water it down. And I'll also hover over my paint palette here so you can see how the liquids look.
While she's getting water, I can also recommend, especially if you're trying to work with kids, is you can get food safe markers that are Wilton. I think they're Wilton brand as well, or I think I've got a couple different ones. But I've used food markers with kids. I've bring them like pre-done already with the sugar paste. Then you can just hand out the markers and they can just draw on them, and then they can still eat them. Just one thought.
Oh yeah,
while
those
she's
food
getting
markers are
water.
fabulous.
They are. Or if you're
I
not able to
adore
bring
them,
the other
and if
stuff.
you go to a specialty kitchen store, they have the most amazing array of food colored markers, and it's food coloring, food safe food coloring that's in them, and it makes this go so much faster. But then you have to call them hand colored, not hand painted.
Yeah.
Just saying.
One tip I was told
um,
is to store them in the fridge when you're not using them. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but I've done that and it seems to help, or it doesn't hurt at
Mm.
least. I don't know. I don't even remember who told me that. It was
So-
some other food SCA person though.
So you're putting them in the fridge, why?
When you're storing them.
Oh, huh.
I don't know if it makes a difference, but somebody told me that a long time ago and I've just done that.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna try this now and hope it works. So, wait.
Okay.
Nope, I have to do it this way. Can I, wait, how do I reverse my image here? Hold on.
Ooh, that I don't know. I think that depends on the tablet.
All right. Is it seeing my color palette?
Yeah, a little bit more towards your right. There we go. Yep, we
Okay.
can see it.
So you can see that all those blobs of color are the Wilton colors. Down here, I'm hoping I don't lose you, right here. This
Yep.
is the Food Club color. And you can see on its edge the light red because it's very watery. This is the red, that's the Wilton. And this is the red watered down. So now if I take that watered down red and put it quickly. So that's the watered down red. And of course, you can add as much red to it to get as deep a color as you want, or no water at all, and you'll get that deep red. So it depends on the look you're trying to get and the intensity of color you want. But I'm very happy with the Wiltons.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I ordered that didn't come in, which I was hoping for, because then I was going to bring my stencils. You can stamp a cookie by painting your food coloring on the stamp, just like you would put paint on, and then stamp your food, stamp your sheet of fondant and cut it into whatever shapes you need, or you can stamp the sheet and make a beautiful piece of fabric for a human sculpture. But there's a company called the Deli Garage. This isn't in my notes. It didn't come in, so I wasn't sure whether I'd share it, but you just shared food pens. So we're going to go with this. So Arnie Tegan is a German who owns the company called the Deli Garage. And the Deli Garage makes something called Food Finish and they're spray paints, which I am just like over the moon excited about, because you'll put your stencils, which if you have a Cricut, you can have it cut, 300 stencils in paper, lay the paper stencil over every single one of the 300 cookies or 300 pieces of fondant that you're going to top a meat pie with. You can top meat pies with fondant, and they look pretty awesome. Cupcakes, tarts, any kind of thing you can drop a little disc of fondant that's been painted or colored onto it. And then you can just take these spray paints and away you go. And you've got 300 gold spray painted crowns on the fondant to cut out and put wherever. And I'm just excited about that because it's a new product, it's edible, and it's a spray paint. How fantastic is that? You could spray paint the stamped cookies in seconds and make them gold gilded. One of the pictures I saw, they spray painted a lobster. Like it's a proper lobster that they're going to serve at the dinner. They spray painted it gold. So they had a gold gilded lobster on a bed of shredded lettuce that you could then eat, because it's the shell. Of course, you're not going to eat the shell anyway, but any residual paint would be something that would taint the food, right? So you're serving a full lobster, claws, tail, and all, gold gilded, or blue, or pink, or orange, or every color of the rainbow. You could do LGBTQ celebration lobsters, painting them all the colors of the rainbow with this. There's so much possibility to play with your food. I love nothing more than playing with my food.
I've seen
More
edible
questions?
varnish, but I've never seen the edible spray, like the
Yeah,
paint.
I'm very excited about it. So I know for a fact that you can get Chef Master makes an edible spray, and it's available on Amazon for about $10 after I found out
that's
about,
the kind I had.
sorry?
I think that's the kind I had, yeah, from Chef Master.
Yeah, Chef Master. And Chef Master makes a wide variety of cake decorating as well. But I find that the Wilton is easily accessible for me. I can get it almost anywhere. At most little cake store supply places or kitchen supply places, they'll carry a line of Wilton. And at one point, I lived down in Victoria. Now I live up in Sayward, where they have nothing. And when I was in Victoria, I bought a large stock from Michael's. And now, of course, thanks to COVID, you can buy from almost any kitchen shop online and they'll ship it. And if you buy a large enough amount, they'll ship it free.
Which is
So
always wonderful.
as for the spray paints, Wilton now makes a spray paint, but I think they only make a gold dust and silver dust spray paint, which is going to be flecks of gold and flecks of silver, because they're into the edible gold and silver. So you're still actually consuming metal. You have to consider that. But a small amount of gold in your system is not a big deal. A large amount of gold will kill you, like it did the Prussian princess who thought that she could stay young forever by eating gold. And mind you, when she died at 45, she still looked 15. So it did keep her looking young and beautiful. But when they examined her bones, she had gold poisoning. So you have to still be careful with metals. ESLAC, ESSLACK, is the European name for the food finish, FOODFINISH product, which is the wide range of spray paints, which I've ordered, and I'm excited. I'm waiting for them to come in. I've ordered the gold, and I've ordered yellow, red, blue, and green, just your basics. And it cost me $100 with postage. And I ordered them from the Deli Garage in Europe. Now, Cake Craft also makes a spray. So there's a few companies out there now making the edible food sprays. I researched them after I saw the golden lobster. I got too excited. Can you imagine? You can gold gilt anything. You could have a gold gilted beef pie. You could have a
Be a heck of a lot easier than
entire
trying to go.
feast. Yeah, you could have an entire feast spray painted in gold and just tell everybody it was gold leafed, because that's what it's going to look like. It's astounding.
Yeah.
And that would have been period. In the handout, you'll see a picture done by of a palace scene entirely done in sugar paste. The difference between fondant and sugar paste is one ingredient, and my mind has just gone blank. I have lupus and I have these mind blanks, but I'll figure it out hopefully before we leave here. The ingredient causes the fondant to harden better and faster. So fondant will always remain just the tiniest little bit soft. And it doesn't have longevity. So these cookies that I've painted will start to, through humidity, break down a little bit after about 3 weeks. I know because I've made wonderful hand decorated cookies for my Christmas tree every year. And they're usually good for about 3 weeks, sometimes 4. And then I have to put them in somewhere where they can dehumidify and get out of the humidity. And if I pack them carefully enough with packets of silica that you get that come in every shipment that needs to stay dry, I save all those and I pack them in with my hand decorated cookies. I put the cookies in between layers of parchment, and then I put the silica packet on the top, and all those cookies are beautiful and dry and crisp and nice to be hung back up on the tree that I've saved from year to year. So I have some that I've saved for 11 or 12 years now. It's maybe longer than that. Actually, yeah, it's closer to 22 years now. So you can keep hand painted fondant a long time. But if you want something to have structural strength, you want to have the sugar paste, and it'll dry very much like royal icing. It'll dry right up and be hard like the royal icing. So just a little
Is
extra in
the
there.
gum tragacanth that you're thinking of?
Sorry?
Gum tragacanth, is that the ingredient you're
Yes,
thinking of?
thank you. Yes, thank you. You
I've done
add
sugar paste, that's what I know.
Yes. Well, I use gum tragacanth in my fondant recipes as
Mhm.
well, because if you don't, it won't cure and you can't paint it. So the classic fondant recipes have the gum tragacanth. However, the sugar paste has a greater quantity of gum tragacanth. And
Mhm.
so that causes it to dry more quickly and harder. So then you can end up with structural pieces that you can lay out just like a gingerbread house. You lay out all your pieces, cut them to shape. The nice thing is that they're not going to change size like your gingerbread does as it bakes. Then they're going to harden and you can put them back together again with more sugar paste or even with royal icing. And
Mhm.
then you get these wonderful sculptures. They did in the Italian city-states in Milan. Yes, it was at the wedding feast of Blanca. And was she a
Yes.
Sforza or a Medici?
I wanna say
Blanca, either a
Medici.
Sforza or a Medici. And they did a life-size groom because the groom couldn't attend the wedding ceremony. They made a life-size groom of sugar paste to be at the wedding and stand in for the groom. And I would love to be able to travel back in time and see that, because they describe it as being this magnificent sculpture. And I can imagine, because they were pretty good with sculpture, and it looked like him. So that, I don't know, guests at the wedding knew what the groom was going to look like, because, no internet, no, even the small painted portraits that people used to send when courting. Henry VIII found out the hard way that his lovely bride didn't look exactly like her portrait. The German bride, that when she arrived, he said she was a horse and sent her away. He divorced her.
If you ever
So,
want to see some sugar paste, it's not out of SCA period, but if you're ever in Toronto, the Gardner Museum has a setup done by Ivan Day, who's a very
yes,
big
I've seen Ivan Days.
historian.
Yeah.
So if you're ever in Toronto, the Gardner Museum, it's a pottery museum, but he did a sugar paste display, and the table is gigantic, and it's got sculptures, and I forget if the flowers are actually sugar paste. They might be ceramic, but if you're ever there, it's definitely worth seeing, especially
I
like
have
just
seen
because
it, and I think it is
especially
entirely
to do
sugar
it.
paste. I think it's entirely sugar paste. That's a very good thing to bring up. Yeah, I used to live in Ottawa, so I used to travel to Toronto quite regularly, and I did go and I did see Ivan Day's display. And then when I was in England, I actually sat in on a class that he was teaching on sugar paste. And I didn't get to participate because I was just an auditor, but he's amazing.
I would have loved to have gone to that. I've seen the actual display because I live in Toronto, but yeah, I've never been able to see
Right.
him teach. Oh, that
Yeah.
would have been amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, when I first saw the young chef, Jamie Oliver. Ivan Day is a lot like Jamie Oliver when he's teaching. He's hilariously funny and irreverent and very, very wonderful teacher. So, any other questions?
I had one more question.
Yeah.
In terms of like the toxic materials, do you think that maybe a lot of those were used for like sugar items that were not necessarily going to be eaten? Because they
Oh,
would sometimes save them
absolutely.
and trot them out for display. And I was wondering if
Absolutely.
maybe like some stuff they wouldn't have known was toxic, but some stuff they would have.
Um, they did do a lot of displays were done in
Mm.
sugar and carved out of sugar, because I'm sure you've seen the historically accurate photos of what a sugar cone looked like.
Yep.
And so sugar used to come in a cone. And so chefs would actually sculpt in the sugar cone the item that was going to be displayed on the table, a horse or a bird or whatever. And sugar paste was used, and fondant, primarily for foods that were going to be consumed. So they did use all those toxic ingredients, and they did consume them, but because they weren't aware that they were toxic. So it is kind of sad. That probably contributed to a lot of post-feast illnesses and deaths.
Hence the reason we use Wilton.
Well, the whole thing about the Food and Drug Administration deciding on 7 colors that were less toxic, then deciding on to add another 8, bringing the number up to 15, and then in the end saying, yeah, no, and cutting it back down to the 7, not the original 7, but 7 that were now less toxic, like less harmful than what was being used before. And those were synthetic colors that were less harmful, because even some of the synthetic colors, like for instance, red, is still made with cochineal. So they're still made with original ingredients to get that intensity of color. Some like verdigris for painting is still made using the copper verdigris. So it's a product that's still used, and they still create a copper, I think it's called a synthetic copper alloy. So they create the synthetic in the same way, but they somehow chemically treat it in a lab so that the most poisonous parts are removed and you still get the color, but there's still copper in it. So we cook with copper cookware. Some of the finest cookware in the world is copper. So we can consume copper. We need copper in trace amounts. So if you're not eating a ton of verdigris colored food, then you're probably still okay. But the original food colorings, when I began to do the research into them, because I came to the SCA with most of my food skills, and trying to find period colors that I could use to do what I already knew how to do took me down that rabbit hole of researching the originals and took me into the science that's dug up most of the Medicis, all of the Sforzas, because, well, they didn't dig them up. The crypts were flooded and they had to remove the bodies and open the tombs and let the water out and then clean up the silt and such. And they said, well, while we have these guys open, can we just take some, skeleton borings and find out what they were made of and what their genetics are? And can we take some little samples of the decayed cloth and find out what fibers were used in the cloth? And can we take a couple of scrapings from this particular one that is particularly well preserved and their intestines are in place and find out what they ate just before they died? So we've had the luck of having nature force us into revisiting graves, and then had science push just a little bit, and anthropologists and historians push just a little bit, and it's not to the point of desecration, but we have all these answers now. So we know that a lot of the dyes that were used were poisonous. And we also have more journals now, because we only looked at the journals that were kept in libraries, monasteries, and that were passed down in the homes of the rich. Now we have all kinds of things popping up that anthropologists and historians have found that are a journal of an ordinary person like me who liked to cook and bake and use this and that, and mentioned in my journal that I used verdigris, or mentioned in my journal that I used the very expensive, I know what it was called, the one from Afghanistan.
Oh, lapis lazuli?
Lapis lazuli is
Oh,
a
wait a
stone,
minute.
yeah. But we would have used these ingredients and mentioned I used lapis. Well, okay, and it was a beautiful blue and everybody was impressed. So that I've said in my journal. So from that, people are now saying, oh, so she was using lapis lazuli, beautiful blue. Oh my God, they were eating stones. So we have found so much about color. But the biggest thing about color is if you're going to eat it and you're going to serve it, try and make sure that you're using what are currently certified as food safe. We have to trust that the ones that are currently certified as food safe actually food safe.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, I haven't just used dyes and paint colorings in cookies, but as I said, I've used it in pastry. I've had a very excellent luck with red in pastry. I didn't have any red powder, or I would have used it. The green, it's hard to tell, but the green is a beautiful dark green and makes the most wonderful roses leaves. And then you can take that dark green and paint it with the tiniest little bit of white icing and paint on top of that with a wash of light green, and you can get the most amazing shading on top of a pie that you have just decorated with pastry roses and leaves as your top pie crust. So there's so much that can be done with food to make it a feast, not just for the body, but for the eyes and the soul. So I hope that everybody who has come to this class goes away thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go buy some food coloring. I'm going to use the food coloring I have in my cupboard, and I'm going to try this." You can also try it on royal icing. Royal icing paints beautifully, by the way. If you want to practice on royal icing, it's super cheap to make. And you can just ice a piece of parchment paper and paint on top of it. And play with your food.
Well, thank you very much. Unless there are any other
So
questions.
how
I
much
could
time have we
look
got
through them.
left? Have I?
We
Are
have
we-
got 25 minutes.
Oh, well, so that's just about right. I asked for 2 hours because I was pretty sure I wouldn't be able to cover everything in an hour. But if everybody wanted to pop out and go to other things, they're perfectly welcome to. We can end the class here. I would just like to personally thank everybody who's spent the time, an hour and a half, listening to me ramble on about one of my favorite things to do.
Oh, there's been some comments saying thank you. So yeah, I think
Oh,
everybody's enjoyed.
excellent. Okay.
Great.
Well-
I'll stop the